Today's video we're going to be changing the rear end fluid on this 1998 Chevy Silverado. Because it's a truck and it's pretty high in the back, we don't even have to jack it up. First step in removing the fluid is actually removing the rear cover here. This one's held on with 13mm bolts. If it's factory, it'll have a gasket. If it's been done by somebody else, it might have an RTV or sealant of some sort around it as well. So we may need to use a screwdriver to help get it off. But right now what we need to do is release all the bolts. We've got our oil catch pan. The stuff in here is pretty thick, so it's just pretty much going to drip straight down. You don't really need any sort of accessory thing to catch because it's not going to really fall anywhere but down. One note to remember is the factory often likes to bolt things to this cover. So here we have our rear brake lines that's bolted to it, and we also have another support here for rear brake line. Note that these nuts will be different than all the others. None of these use sealant, but these aren't shouldered. They just have it's like a regular nut and a washer. So just remember when you're putting them back that that's where these special ones go. These are loosened up. I'm going to take a screwdriver here and pry just gently. It should be metal in here, but you should crack it open and get that grease out of here. This is some smelly, stinky stuff. So this is stuff you really don't want to get on you. And this is a non-posi rear end. If it were a posi rear end, there's a special additive you have to use if it's not already included in the rear end oil you're going to use, especially if it's a GM one. It's just like an ounce bottle of a special chemical that helps the clutches, but ours is an open rear end, so no big deal. Now that we've got most of it out, I'm just going to pull these two bolts out and we're going to remove this back pan. Let's get this out of the way. While we're under here, there's not really too much to check. You can check the gear here for any uneven wear. There's a heavy spot in the center or top or bottom. If there's any excessive amount of wear up here. There's going to be a magnet on the case that we just took off, so we can look at that as well. There will be metal wear because it is metal, but the oil pretty much does its job. But what we need to do pretty much here is just to let it drain, and we got to come here with a little squeegee or whatever and get the rest of this gasket off. So we're just down to a clean metal surface, wipe it down, and then we're essentially done back here in terms of getting things taken off and cleaned. Okay, here's the rear end cover. That's the rest of the outside. These notches indicate where those things bolted on. So this is the top, this is the bottom. I'm going to flip that around. Provisions to allow the gear to turn. And my 99 and our 2000 S10 didn't have a magnet, but this one does. It's going to have all sorts of metal clippings on it, so we definitely want to take that off and clean it. It's not unusual to have wear. These are metal parts rubbing against metal parts. As long as you don't see any large chunks or this thing is just a huge puff ball of metal particulates, you're fine. I mean, there's not much you can do otherwise outside of replacing the rear axle, so just keep an eye on it. This one is probably typical if it's never been changed before, which I don't know if that's a GM gasket or not. It probably is. So, you know, that's fine. But what we're going to do now is clean the inside, totally wipe it down. Actually use a little solvent like Simple Green or something like that. Then we're going to flip it over and do something else. We're actually going to paint it so it looks cool under the truck. Okay, what I'm going to do now before I do the final wipe down, and you can see we got most of this magnet's actually glued on. First one I've come across. Usually they're just placed on here in a little divot, but the divot's not very big, so it was glued on. So just clean it up. It's pretty done. The gasket's gone. It's pretty much a flat, shiny surface, which is about what we're looking for. This end, however, has just some surface rust on it. So I'm going to take a drill with a wire wheel, and we're going to go ahead and just scruff this whole thing up, and then we're just going to lay some paint on it just because it'll look prettier. And from under the truck, it doesn't have to be great because no one's actually going to stare at it, but it'll just make it look nicer. Now that I've knocked all the chunks off it, I'm usually used to main cars where this thing's about to fall apart anyway. It's so rusty. This one's in great shape, but we've knocked all the big rust off. I'm putting some Simple Green on it so we can chew away a little bit of this grease around the edges. I'm going to rinse it and let it dry, and then we're going to go ahead and just paint it. Once again, it's not important, we're just kind of protecting it, and might as well make it shiny while we're at it. And the paint of the day is metallic chrome. Obviously it's not going to take much to cover this thing. Probably put about 3 coats on it. Okay, so we have our hardware set. Our rear end cover is painted. It's nice and shiny. I have cleaned up the bolts, just making sure the threads were clear. I've put the light coat of anti-seize on them. You don't need to put any sort of Loctite or sealant on these, except for this guy right here, which is the one that held on the brake thing. The brake distribution block for the rear. I'm not worried about it, but it's something the factory does. In theory, you're supposed to put them in the same hole they came out of, but the factory doesn't care, and for the sake and purpose of this truck, I don't care. And then the gasket here, you don't need to use a gasket sealant or silicone or anything along those lines. If you have a gasket, you can put them on with a sealant, and you can even put a sealant on the gasket and put it on the cap just to hold it for you, but it's not required, so we're not going to use it here because I don't want to use it. So now we're going to crawl into the truck, gasket, cover, start threading in our bolts. So we have our clean base here. I have my gasket, which I've already kind of pre-checked to make sure that it fits, because that's the big thing too, is if you get the wrong size gasket, that's no good. Take my clean cover, slide it up where these little slots are on top is where the little tools go, and you can pull these out a little bit. So now we just need to, and that will flip back over, just need to get our gasket hole lined up with the bolt hole. And yeah, the gasket is sometimes a pain, that's why people pre-attach them, but we won't be long, and really it's not that much threading. If you had an awl, that would definitely work too. That one's also lined up. There we go. I don't paint the bolts heads because they provide enough contrast on the cover to actually show that you've actually kind of done something to the cover. Nice like so. So now we can just go and put in all our nuts. I should say put in all the bolts. Tighten them up in a crisscross pattern to equally torque the lid against the rear carrier. And now that they're all snug, then we're going to just torque them to 30 foot-pounds, which just remember isn't tight. Perfect torque isn't really required here. At least I have found in my history that it's not super duper important. Just don't put them on super duper tight. And now we're done with this part, so we're going to pull everything out and then we're going to access it from the front because we have to fill this thing now with grease or oil, an 80 weight 90. Okay, the fill point for the rear differential is right back here. It actually just takes I believe a 3/8 inch size ratchet adapter, and it's just a plug. It should be able to back off and make sure it's not real dirty or bringing anything into it. There's no real torque for putting it back, you just put it in until it bottoms out. Now I have oil that's been sitting in the sun to help it to pour. Now comes the plug. We're going to be filling it until it reaches the base of this hole. So we have our 80 weight 90. We cut a little nozzle off on our tip here, and now we just keep filling until it's full. This is a long, hard, annoying job, so you pretty much have to just bear with it. Once you verify that the oil level's high enough, clean the little plug off, back in the hole, tighten it in, and you have just changed the oil in your rear differential for pretty much any GM car, probably any car rear-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, but especially for this 1998 Chevy Silverado.